What if I told you the seal wasn't the end of the story, but the spark that ignited a dangerous beginning? Most people breathe a sigh of relief when they hear the word sealed, as if it's a guarantee of peace, protection, and rest. But the truth? The seal is only the beginning. And what happens next will not bring unity. It will divide, even more than you thought possible. This message is not for the curious. It's for the called. Because when you're truly sealed, you're marked for movement, not comfort. You're positioned for conflict, not applause. And the deeper you walk in truth, the more separation you'll start to see. In your friendships, in your church, even within your own household. It's happening now, quietly for some, violently for others. Here's the part no one wants to preach. What comes next will be loud. It will expose what's fake, confront what's hidden, and shatter what looked stable. The real divide is not believer versus non-believer. It's sealed versus familiar. And many won't be ready for what this separation will cost, or what it will reveal. Because when God divides, it's never just symbolic. It's spiritual surgery. So before you scroll past this video, ask yourself, were you truly sealed, or just surrounded by sealed people? Because if you're still expecting peace in a time of prophetic confrontation, you may have mistaken the beginning for the end. But don't worry, you're here for a reason. And what you're about to hear might just change everything. A lot of people think the seal was the finish line, like a divine stamp of safe and sound, and now it's just cruise control to heaven. But no, that's not how it works. According to Revelation 7, the sealed ones were preserved, not to escape, but to be sent. It's like soldiers being marked before heading into battle. The seal isn't for shelter, it's for strategy. The marking is not a reward, it's an assignment. Being sealed doesn't mean the tests are over. It means the exposure is about to begin. Think of Elijah. He was marked and then immediately thrust into confrontation with kings and prophets of Baal. Or Jesus, he was baptized and right after that, led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted. That seal, that divine moment, isn't an exemption from trials. It's often the invitation to them. And here's where it gets real. Those who've been sealed are being positioned for visibility. This is the moment when their light starts to shine in places that were comfortable with the dark. Don't be surprised if things get more intense after your spiritual awakening. It's part of the process. The seal awakens the fight, not avoids it. If you're feeling that pressure lately, maybe that's confirmation, not confusion. So what should someone sealed actually be doing now? It's not about hiding in a prayer closet forever. It's about preparing. Dig into the Word with new urgency. Books like God's Generals by Robert Liardon or The Final Quest by Rick Joyner can fuel that fire. But most of all, live like someone who was sealed for deployment, not for decoration. Because the next phase, it's not going to be silent anymore. There comes a moment in every divine process where what was once hidden begins to surface. And we're living in that moment now. The sealing marked a spiritual boundary. But now, that boundary is crossing into the visible. The light that the sealed carry is no longer quiet. It's starting to burn through the atmosphere. And that light is beginning to make people uncomfortable, even those who once walked beside you. Because the seal changes your frequency, and not everyone can stay tuned in. What used to feel like unity is now feeling like tension. There's an uneasiness rising in places that once felt safe. You'll notice it in your conversations. When you speak truth, people squirm. When you choose holiness, they call it judgment. Where there was once agreement, there's now passive resistance. That's not your fault. It's the evidence of separation at work. Jesus himself said it. Do you think I came to bring peace? No, but a sword. And that sword doesn't just slice nations, it divides homes, churches, circles. What's wild is that this separation doesn't always look dramatic. It often unfolds in silence. One day, you just realize you're not invited anymore. The phone stops ringing. You walk into places that once felt like family, and now something's different. That's not paranoia. That's prophetic alignment. The closer you move to the light, the more anything counterfeit starts to fall away. It's not rejection, it's divine pruning. And yet, the pain of this shift is real. No one tells you that the sword Jesus mentioned would feel so personal, that it would cut through relationships you thought were lifelong. But this isn't punishment, it's preparation. God is not trying to isolate you. He's revealing who was truly connected and who was just convenient. And as that separation becomes more visible, the reactions will only intensify. As the light of the sealed begins to shine brighter, the discomfort in the atmosphere grows thicker. People who once celebrated your faith now keep their distance. They don't always say it out loud, but their silence speaks volumes. There's a spiritual tension rising, not because the sealed are attacking, but because their very presence exposes what others are trying to hide. The seal doesn't need to scream. It simply reveals. What's happening now is deeper than disagreement. It's exposure. The unsealed are beginning to feel seen, and not in a way they enjoy. It starts subtly. Jokes that cut, conversations that turn cold, invitations that stop coming. But behind these social shifts is something much greater, a spirit of resistance to the presence of truth. And it's not the world reacting. It's those who once stood beside you in faith. We are entering a season where spiritual contrast will trigger conflict. Expect to see scandals erupting in once revered ministries. Expect leaders to fall, not because they weren't gifted, but because they weren't sealed. Expect believers to rationalize compromise with eloquent words that sound wise but carry no anointing. It will look like maturity, but it will smell like fear, and all of it will be provoked by the silent power of the sealed. You might be wondering, why is this happening now? Because light doesn't ask for permission to shine. It simply reveals what's been hidden. The sealed don't even need to confront. Their lifestyle alone becomes confrontation. Their choices, their peace, their clarity, all of it becomes unbearable for those still clinging to shadows. And that reaction, it's not random. It's the evidence that the dividing line is real, and it's already being drawn. The time of invisible markers is ending. What was once spiritual and unseen is now beginning to manifest in tangible, undeniable ways. The sealed are starting to look different, not just in appearance, but in atmosphere. There's a purity about them that disrupts rooms, a stillness that speaks louder than words. They're not trying to be holy. They've been through a transformation, and that change is now radiating in their actions, choices, and even in their silence. You can see it in their priorities. While the world chases speed, the sealed seek stillness. While others are obsessed with influence, they're anchored in intimacy. They no longer crave platforms. They crave presence. They're separating from distractions and refusing to partner with compromise. They're not entertained by what once amused them. The jokes don't land the same. The music, the media, the social chatter, it all starts to feel like noise. That's not legalism, that's alignment. And this is where it becomes unmistakable. They don't follow the same agenda anymore. They're not driven by trends, titles, or approval. Their decisions are not dictated by fear, but by discernment. They see through the charades. They sense deception quickly, and they are unapologetically stepping away from systems that once felt safe. As Malachi 3:18 says, "Then you will again see the distinction between the righteous and the wicked." That moment is here, and it's no longer subtle. Even within the church, two distinct faces are emerging. One church is flashy, performance-driven, consumer-focused. The other is broken, burning, and burdened. And the sealed, they're drawn to the flame, not the fog machines. They want truth over comfort, conviction over entertainment. And that hunger makes them outcasts in places they once called home. The difference is no longer prophetic, it's visible, and it's permanent. And as this division becomes clearer, the next confrontation becomes unavoidable. This is the moment no one wants to talk about. The moment when the real battle begins inside the camp. It's no longer us versus the world. Now, it's sealed versus religious. And that hurts more than any persecution from unbelievers. Because it's not coming from strangers, it's coming from brothers, from spiritual mentors, ministry partners, and longtime friends. The very people who once said, "We're in this together," are now uncomfortable around the fire you carry. Not because you changed, but because your seal began to expose their lack. You'll notice the shift. Suddenly, conversations become surface level. Your hunger for God is labeled too radical. Your discernment is seen as division. But what's really happening is spiritual incompatibility. You've grown, and they haven't. You've been pruned, and they've resisted the process. And now, what was once familiar has become foreign. This is what it means when God begins to divide, not between light and darkness, but between authentic and artificial. Even Jesus walked this road. He wasn't betrayed by the crowd, he was betrayed by someone in his circle. Judas wasn't a hater from afar. He walked with Jesus, performed miracles, and kissed him on the cheek. That's how close the betrayal can be. And for those who are sealed, that kind of heartbreak will come. Ministries will be torn apart. Friendships will dissolve without explanation. But it's not always the enemy attacking. Sometimes it's God pruning, cutting away what can't go where he's taking you next. And here's the hardest truth. Some people who once fought beside you will now fight against you, not because you failed them, but because you've become a mirror. And mirrors make people uncomfortable when they don't like what they see. The seal exposes motives, hidden pride, and shallow commitment. And when people feel exposed, they either repent or retaliate. Many will choose the latter. And when they do, it's not your job to argue. It's your call to keep moving. Being sealed was never the finish line. It was the starting point for confrontation. Many expected the seal to bring a season of safety, blessings, and spiritual ease. But heaven doesn't seal you to protect your comfort. It seals you to prepare you for war. Those who carry the seal are now being activated for divine assignments, not behind pulpits, but right in the middle of corrupted systems. This is the moment when God begins sending his marked ones into the arenas that most fear to enter. Not to entertain, but to expose. Like Elijah before Ahab, the sealed are not being sent to negotiate, they're being sent to disrupt. Their words won't be cute or convenient. They'll sound like confrontation, because they are confrontation. They will be called divisive, too intense, unloving. But don't be deceived. It's not harshness, it's holiness. The sealed ones have seen too much, heard too much, and died to too much to settle for polished sermons and cultural Christianity. Their fire is not for stage lights, it's for system breaking. And just like John the Baptist stood outside the temple, wearing camel hair and crying out in the wilderness, today's sealed ones will be misunderstood. They won't be featured, they'll be feared. Because when you speak from the Spirit and not from the script, you threaten what's fake. These voices will call out manipulation masked as ministry. They'll confront doctrines that comfort the flesh but starve the soul. And for that, they'll be attacked, not by the world, but by the religious. This isn't a season for applause. It's a season for boldness. The sealed were not marked to be influencers. They were marked to be intercessors, watchmen, prophets, reformers. And that's a lonely path. It's the kind of calling that demands fasting when others are feasting, silence when others are speaking, and courage when others are hiding. The sealed will stand on truth, even when it costs them everything. And it will. So if you've been feeling like your fire no longer fits, maybe that's because your assignment doesn't belong in comfort zones. You weren't marked to maintain. You were chosen to confront. And this next season isn't about building platforms. It's about tearing down altars, false ones, cultural ones, religious ones, because what's coming isn't about visibility. It's about victory. And only the sealed will survive the confrontation. The sealing was done in silence, but what comes next will echo loudly across relationships, churches, and even within hearts. It won't come gently. It will confront, expose, and divide. And if you thought being sealed was the reward, you may have misunderstood the assignment. The real battle begins now, and it will cost more than comfort. Those who've been sealed will soon realize they're not called to blend in. They're chosen to stand out. That's not always glamorous, and it rarely comes with applause. But it's in the pressure that purpose is refined. When the fire hits, the fake melts, and the real ones remain. So I ask you again, are you truly ready to be separated in public after being sealed in secret? When your convictions are no longer popular, will you still hold the line? When familiar faces turn away, will you stay the course? This is not the time to waver. It's the time to rise. If this message stirred something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Let's keep the fire spreading. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this word, and subscribe to stay connected. And in the comments, tell me, what part of this message spoke directly to your season? Because trust me, what's coming next is only for the truly sealed.